The Galactic Assembly's chamber shimmered like a galaxy in miniature, the dome above them speckled with thousands of stars. Representatives from over 100 species sat in tiered arcs, each encased in their own environment-sustaining field. Some breathed ammonia, others methane. A few relied on biochemical light to communicate, but all shared a singular purpose: maintaining the fragile order of the universe. Today, their collective gaze turned to a newly discovered species, one that straddled the precarious line between potential ally and insignificant anomaly. Envoy Rauker stood at the center of the Assembly's platform. His scales shimmered a deep iridescent green under the artificial starlight, and his elongated eyes scanned the chamber with practiced ease. As a representative of the Draskin, one of the Assembly's founding species, Rauker had the unenviable task of presenting the findings on humanity. Esteemed delegates, his voice resonated, amplified through translation algorithms. We gather today to finalize our evaluation of a species from the Sol system. Homo sapiens, or humans, as they call themselves, have displayed remarkable adaptability, intelligence, and ambition. However, he paused, glancing briefly at his notes, though he hardly needed them. They lack the fundamental traits necessary for survival in the broader galactic community. Their history, while rich in conflict, has turned them into a species too mired in sentimentality, too bound by cooperation to survive true existential threats. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Many agreed, though a few, Rauker noted, remained skeptical. His gaze briefly flicked to Ambassador Tylern of the Xeric Union, a species renowned for their cunning and strategic brilliance. Tylern's spines bristled subtly, a sign of withheld disagreement. Rauker continued, "Their advancements in technology are commendable, but their tools are guided by a naive idealism. They build for comfort, not conquest. Their weapons, while innovative, lack the ruthlessness required of a truly resilient species. In short, they are not warriors. They are builders and dreamers." Tylern's sharp voice cut through the murmurs. Is it not the Assembly's duty to guide and uplift emerging species? To dismiss them as too peaceful is to ignore the potential beneath their surface. Rauker's scaled brow ridge-arched. Potential without the will to defend it is a liability. Shall we risk exposing our galaxy to a species incapable of withstanding a true threat? The Crackthul continue to test our borders, and yet you suggest integrating a species whose greatest weapons are their words and art. The chamber quieted as a holographic display illuminated the space above the platform. Images of Earth flashed, vast metropolises, oceans teeming with life, humans engaged in acts of kindness and creativity. But the sequence also included humanity's conflicts: mushroom clouds of nuclear detonations, scorched battlefields, and streets torn apart by riots. This, Rauker gestured to the chaotic montage, is their duality. Peaceful, yes. Capable of violence, certainly. But the nature of their violence is telling. It is impulsive, reactive, and emotional. They lack discipline. They lack purpose. When the Crackthul march, they will not care for poetry or empathy. Humanity will fold under the weight of such a relentless enemy. Another voice emerged, softer but unyielding. Peaceful does not mean incapable. The speaker, a member of the Terralith, was an imposing figure of crystalline sinew. Ambassador Kryle's voice chimed like distant bells. The Assembly once doubted my people for similar reasons. We were seen as brittle, too serene to endure the harshness of interstellar politics. Yet here we stand. Should we not grant humanity the same opportunity? Rauker opened his mouth to counter, but the Assembly's arbiter, a being of pure plasma encased in a containment field, intervened. Enough! The time for debate has ended. The motion stands. Humanity will remain under observation, but will not be granted membership at this time. The decision was met with a mixture of approval and discontent. Tylern shook his head, his spines flattening in resignation, while Kryle's crystalline frame shimmered faintly with frustration. Rauker, for his part, felt a pang of unease. The conclusion was logical, but logic had its limits. As the chamber dimmed and the delegates began to disperse, Rauker lingered. His mind was drawn back to the reports he had studied, the footage of humans banding together during disasters, their capacity for unity under pressure. He pushed the thought aside. Sentiment had no place in his role. Far away, on the blue-green planet spinning quietly at the edge of the galaxy, the humans were unaware of their dismissal. For now, the Earth's atmosphere shimmered as the alien vessel descended, its sleek, obsidian surface reflecting the pale sunlight. Crowds gathered in carefully cordoned areas near the landing site, a sprawling facility built hastily by Earth's finest engineers under the strict supervision of the United Nations. Journalists with cameras, dignitaries in tailored suits, and soldiers clad in ceremonial uniforms all waited with an air of palpable anticipation. This was history in the making, the first direct interaction between humanity and the Galactic Assembly. Captain Lena Torres adjusted the collar of her dress uniform, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. She stood apart from the throng, her presence a calculated choice by the delegation. A decorated veteran of Earth's most turbulent conflicts, Torres represented a different side of humanity. Not the politicians, not the idealists, but those who carried the burden of defense when diplomacy faltered. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe knot, and her expression bore the tempered resolve of someone who had seen both the best and worst of human nature. The ship's hull opened with a whisper, revealing a ramp that descended gracefully to the ground. Envoy Rauker emerged first, his iridescent scales gleaming under the sunlight. He moved with the deliberate precision of someone who knew every eye was upon him. Behind him, a team of assistants, varying in height, form, and biology, followed, their alien appearances drawing murmurs from the crowd. "Greetings," Rauker began, his voice resonating in perfect English thanks to the universal translator affixed to his chest. "On behalf of the Galactic Assembly, I thank you for hosting this historic meeting." His gaze swept the assembled crowd, pausing briefly on Torres before continuing. "It is a rare privilege to witness the dawn of a species' entry into the broader galactic community." The UN Secretary-General, an aging man with a calm demeanor, stepped forward and extended a hand. Rauker hesitated for a fraction of a second before clasping it, the gesture a symbol of tentative goodwill. Cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment. Torres, standing at a slight distance, studied Rauker closely. The alien's words carried a tone she couldn't quite place, polished and diplomatic, yet faintly condescending. She wondered if anyone else caught it. The day unfolded with a carefully choreographed series of events. Tours of Earth's cultural landmarks, demonstrations of technology, and an elaborate banquet showcasing humanity's culinary diversity all served as a showcase of the planet's accomplishments. Throughout it all, Rauker maintained a professional veneer, though his subtle remarks hinted at his true feelings. At the banquet, he addressed the gathered leaders. "It is commendable how humanity has united in recent years to prepare for this moment. Though, of course, unity is often born from necessity." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Your history is a tapestry of struggle and survival. Yet, from what we have observed, your most defining trait is not your strength, but your hope." Torres, seated near the back, exchanged a glance with Dr. Emil Howard, a leading astrophysicist and another key member of the delegation. Howard leaned closer. "He's testing the waters," he murmured. "Or baiting us," Torres replied, her tone low. Later that evening, as the banquet wound down and the dignitaries mingled, Rauker approached Torres. His elongated eyes studied her, with a curiosity that felt invasive. "Captain Torres," he said, his voice smooth, "I understand you are a representative of Earth's military forces. Tell me, what does war mean to your kind?" Torres held his gaze, her expression unreadable. "War," she said carefully, "is what happens when diplomacy fails. It's chaos, destruction, and loss. But it's also where humanity learns its most painful lessons. We fight because we have to, not because we want to." Rauker tilted his head, his scales shifting to a darker hue. "A pragmatic view, though not entirely unexpected. But tell me, Captain, has your species ever faced an existential threat? One that required unity beyond your small-scale conflicts? Torres felt the weight of his question. We've faced challenges that pushed us to the brink. Natural disasters, global wars, even the looming threat of extinction. Each time, we found a way to survive. Rauker's lips curled into a faint, enigmatic smile. Perhaps, but survival is not the same as resilience. The galaxy does not pity the vulnerable. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion. One of Rauker's assistants approached, speaking rapidly in their native language. Rauker's expression shifted, and he excused himself with a polite nod. As he left, Torres felt a chill. Something about his words lingered in her mind, a nagging sense that humanity's strength was still being measured and found wanting. The night ended with a quiet ceremony, a symbolic exchange of gifts between Earth and the Galactic Assembly. The humans offered a carefully curated archive of Earth's history, art, and scientific achievements. In return, Rauker presented a shimmering crystalline device, said to contain a condensed history of the Assembly's founding species. As the alien delegation prepared to depart, Torres stood on the observation deck, watching the sleek ship rise into the sky. Howard joined her, his breath fogging the glass as he spoke. You felt it too, didn't you? That judgment. They're testing us, Torres said. I just don't think we know the rules yet. Far above, Rauker sat in his ship's command chamber, reviewing the day's recordings. His expression was unreadable, though his mind churned with thoughts. Perhaps humanity's greatest flaw wasn't their hope, but their inability to see how fragile it made them. On the ground, as the ship's lights vanished into the atmosphere, Torres clenched her fists. If the Assembly wanted a demonstration of resilience, she had a feeling they wouldn't have to wait long. The days following the departure of the Galactic Assembly delegation were marked by a sense of unease. The celebration that had greeted the alien visitors had been replaced by an unsettling silence. In the wake of their departure, humanity's leaders felt the weight of their decisions pressing down. But it wasn't just political leaders who felt this. Captain Lena Torres felt it too, though in a different way. As a soldier, she was used to preparing for the unknown. But this unknown was something more insidious. The humans were being watched, and Rauker's words still echoed in her mind. It was on the morning of the third day after the delegation's departure that the first signs of danger appeared. An encrypted message arrived, intercepted by Earth's military communications network, detailing a series of violent, coordinated attacks along the outer fringes of Assembly space. The attackers were unknown at first, a violent species whose name was whispered in fearful tones by those who had encountered them. The Krakthal, their ships, jagged and ominous, moved with terrifying precision, wiping out outposts, colonies, and any life that happened to be in their path. And the Assembly was scrambling. Reports flooded in, military alliances fractured, planets left defenseless, and entire populations lost without warning. Despite their advanced technology and seemingly infinite resources, the Assembly had never faced an enemy like this. Commander, Lieutenant Harrow's voice crackled over the comms, breaking Torres from her thoughts. We've received the message. The Krakthal are advancing faster than predicted. They've attacked one of the Assembly's border worlds. Casualties are catastrophic. Torres stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Prepare the briefing room. I'll be there in 10. She wasn't surprised by the urgency in Harrow's voice. There had been rumors, whispers, that the Assembly's military might was built on politics rather than power. Humanity had been naive to think the aliens were untouchable. Now, it seemed, the universe had conspired to deliver them a wake-up call. In the briefing room, a large holographic map of the galaxy pulsed before the delegation. Dr. Emil Howard was already there, his face tense as he studied the unfolding crisis. Torres strode to the front, her eyes scanning the alien symbols scattered across the map. The Krakthal were coming faster than expected. Humanity's military presence is practically non-existent outside our homeworld, Howard said, his voice tight with concern. If they get to Earth, we'll be defenseless. And yet, he turned to the map, his eyes lingering on the Assembly's defensive perimeter. The Assembly, with all its advanced technology, is struggling to hold back the Krakthal. They might not have the coordination to stop them. Torres nodded slowly, her mind already racing through tactical options. She'd seen the same pattern before. Enemy forces pressing a vulnerable target, and an ill-prepared defense crumbling under the weight of a coordinated assault. But humanity had survived before, and it would again. "You're right," she said, her voice firm, "but we don't have the luxury of waiting for the assembly to decide how to respond. They'll be too busy arguing about their diplomatic protocols while planets burn." She turned to Harrow, who was stationed at the communications console. "Contact the military chain of command. We'll need to send a message." The lieutenant's fingers flew across the console. "Message sent, Captain. We've requested permission to deploy Earth's forces to aid the assembly. I've also reached out to our allies on the assembly's outer rim. They'll need all the help they can get." Torres took a deep breath. She wasn't sure if humanity's military could hold its own against a full-scale, crack-fell assault, but one thing was certain. If they didn't act, the assembly would be left to stumble blindly toward annihilation. Humanity wasn't going to wait for permission. She wasn't going to wait for an invitation. The hours that followed were a blur of rapid preparation. The situation was deteriorating faster than they had imagined. Each report that came in painted a darker picture. Colonies devastated, military outposts obliterated, civilian ships fleeing in every direction. There was no question now. Humanity would take action. By the time the first fleet of Earth's ships prepared to launch, Captain Torres had already secured command of the operation. She stood on the bridge of the flagship, looking out at the fleet of hastily mobilized vessels assembled before her. It was a ragtag collection. Some ships were state-of-the-art, while others were old, salvage vessels with patchwork modifications. But they were humanity's, and that was what mattered. "Captain," Harrow's voice broke through the quiet hum of the command center. "We've received an encrypted transmission from Envoy Rauker. He insists that humanity's involvement would be unnecessary, that the Assembly's forces are more than capable of handling the situation." Torres clenched her jaw, but her voice remained steady. "Relay the message to him. Tell him we'll be there anyway. The Assembly can either accept help or watch their border worlds fall." She turned to the rest of her officers, her gaze hardening. "Prepare for launch." The decision had been made. Humanity's first military intervention in galactic affairs was about to begin. As the fleet of Earth's ships moved into position, Torres couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a storm, one that would either make or break humanity's place in the galaxy. She glanced at the star-filled expanse ahead, and then back at the faces of her crew. They were ready. They had no choice but to be. "We may not have the technology of the Assembly," she said, her voice low but resolute. "But we have something they don't. We have the will to fight. We'll show them just how far we're willing to go." The ships surged forward, breaking through the atmosphere with the deafening roar of engines straining under the pressure. And for the first time since they had been dismissed as too peaceful, humanity was going to prove that there was more to them than just their hope. The battle had begun. Humanity's fleet, though small in comparison to the vast military might of the Galactic Assembly, fought with a ferocity born of necessity. Captain Torres stood at the helm of the vanguard, her hands steady as she commanded her crew through the chaos of the crack-fell assault. The bridge was alive with activity. Officers barking orders, technicians scrambling to maintain the integrity of their ship systems, and gunners locked in a deadly dance with the enemy. Every moment was a calculated risk, each move a desperate bid to survive. Torres' mind raced, cataloging everything she had learned in her years of military service. The Crackthul were relentless, their ships designed for speed and brutal impact. Unlike any enemy humanity had faced before, they did not fight with tactics or strategy. They fought with instinct, overwhelming any resistance through sheer force. Their weapons were designed to tear through shields and hulls with terrifying ease, and their bloodthirsty nature meant that they were more than willing to sacrifice anything or anyone to achieve their goal of destruction. "Captain," Lieutenant Harrow called from her station, "we've lost contact with the Outer Rim fleet. Their line is collapsing." Torres cursed under her breath. The Crackthul were advancing faster than they had anticipated, flanking humanity's forces with brutal precision. They were pushing the line closer to the Assembly's core, and with each passing moment, their chances of holding them back were slipping away. Divert all available firepower to the left flank, Torres ordered. We need to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. All ships maintain formation. Do not engage the enemy head-on unless absolutely necessary. As the orders rang out, Torres gripped the command chair, her knuckles turning white. It was a dance, a calculated gamble, keeping the enemy at bay while trying to organize an effective counterattack. The Krakthul didn't fight like any opponent humanity had prepared for. They didn't think ahead. They simply reacted with violence. It was their unpredictability that made them so dangerous. The Vanguard shuddered as a series of blasts rocked the ship's outer hull. The shields flickered but held barely. The crew worked feverishly to stabilize the systems, but it was becoming clear that they were outmatched. Hull integrity at 70%, Harrow reported. I recommend we fall back, Captain. We can't keep taking these hits. Torres' gaze hardened. She knew when to retreat, but she also knew when it was too late. We're not falling back, she said through clenched teeth. We hold the line. Now! Her voice was a command, not a plea, and the crew responded immediately. There was no room for doubt, no time for hesitation. This was humanity's first real test. If they faltered now, they might never get another chance to prove their worth. A Krakthul ship, larger and more menacing than the others, came into view on the scanners. It was a behemoth, drifting toward them with the weight of inevitability. Captain, it's the flagship, Harrow said, her voice trembling. They brought out their flagship. If we don't take it down now... I know, Torres interjected, her voice steady. Set a course for its weak point. All weapons to the front. We're taking it down? The crew's faces were lit by the glow of the tactical display. It was an impossible mission. The flagship of the Krakthul was built to withstand everything humanity could throw at it. But Torres wasn't going to let fear dictate their actions. They'd faced impossible odds before. This time wouldn't be any different. The Vanguard surged forward, its weapons locking onto the enemy vessel. A burst of plasma fire exploded from their main cannons, but it barely left a scratch on the Krakthul ship's shields. The behemoth retaliated almost immediately, its turrets firing with deadly accuracy. Another blast hit the Vanguard, sending a shockwave that rattled the bridge and caused the lights to flicker. Shields failing. Hull breach imminent, Harrow shouted, her voice strained. Torres gritted her teeth, the strain evident in every line of her face. I said, hold the line. She turned to the helm officer. Push us closer. We need to disable their weapons. The ship shuddered as the distance between them closed, the massive Krakthul vessel looming larger in the viewports. The enemy flagship continued to fire relentlessly, but now they were close enough to hit back with concentrated fire. A series of shots landed on the Krakthul ship's starboard side, finally breaching its shields. Captain, we've broken through their shields, one of the gunners called. Engage torpedoes. The Vanguard's torpedo bays opened, releasing a volley of high-powered projectiles aimed directly at the Krakthul flagship. They tore through its outer hull, exposing critical systems to the void of space. For a moment, there was silence as the Krakthul ship staggered, the loss of power evident in its sudden lack of response. We've done it, Harrow shouted, relief flooding her voice. We've crippled their flagship, but Torres' victory was short-lived. As the Krakthul flagship faltered, a massive wave of enemy ships arrived, drawn by the distress signals of their flagship's collapse. The Krakthul were relentless, and now they were aware of humanity's capabilities. The battle had escalated. Torres' mind raced, calculating the odds. There was no way to take on this mini Krakthul with what they had left. She glanced at the communications officer, whose hands were moving rapidly across the console. Captain, we've just received a message from the assembly, the officer said. It's Rauker. Torres hesitated before answering, knowing that anything less than a direct and firm response could cost them their chance at survival. Put it through? Rauker's hologram flickered to life before her, his expression unreadable. Captain Torres, he began, his voice clipped, the assembly has decided to assist you. We will send reinforcements immediately. Torres felt a flicker of hope. The timing was critical. Thank you, Rauker. But make it fast. We've got a war to win. As the fleet continued to fight, humanity's resolve was solidified. They were no longer simply defending their home. They were staking their claim in a universe that had once dismissed them. And with the arrival of the Assembly's reinforcements on the horizon, there was one final question that hung in the air. Could humanity truly hold the line? Or would the Crackthulls show them the true cost of their ambition? The battle raged in the silence of space, a violent ballet of explosions, flashing shields, and the terrible sound of metal tearing through the vacuum. Captain Lena Torres stood at the helm of the Vanguard, her hands steady despite the chaos unfolding before her. The Crackthul had shown no mercy. Their ships, massive and menacing, surged forward with an insatiable hunger for destruction, and their sheer numbers made it clear. This would not be a quick fight. Every move, every shot, could mean life or death for her crew. "Captain, the enemy flagship is closing in." Lieutenant Harrow's voice rang out from behind her, urgent and clipped. "We got incoming fire. Our shields are holding, but not for long." Torres clenched her jaw, staring out at the jagged silhouette of the Crackthul vessel that now loomed large in their viewports. Its hull was lined with spiked protrusions, a design that looked as though it had been created for one purpose: to instill fear. The Crackthul had no concern for aesthetics. Their ships were weapons, pure and simple, built to strike terror into their enemies. They were the apex predators of space, and humanity was nothing more than prey in their eyes. "Return fire," Torres barked. "Focus everything on their weapons array. We need to cripple them before they can engage our fleet." A barrage of plasma fire erupted from the Vanguard's cannons, sending waves of energy across the void. The enemy flagship flinched but kept moving, its own cannons firing in retaliation. The Vanguard shook as the shields absorbed the impact. Harrow's voice crackled over the comms again. "Captain, shields are down to 40%. At this rate, we won't be able to survive another direct hit." Torres didn't need to hear the numbers. She had felt the impact in her bones. The crew was doing their best, but the odds were against them. The Crackthul ships didn't play fair. They didn't follow any rules of engagement. Every attack felt like a hammer, relentless and unforgiving. But humanity was not known for giving up, especially not when the stakes were so high. "Status on the rest of the fleet?" Torres asked, her voice cool despite the pressure mounting around her. "We're holding steady for now," Harrow responded, her tone grim. "But we're getting reports of heavy damage across multiple ships. The Crackthul are closing in fast." Torres nodded, her mind racing. The fleet wasn't large, but it was determined. The Earth ships, though outclassed by the alien invaders, were built with one distinct advantage: their crews' unwavering resolve. Humanity had always been scrappy, fighting to overcome their limitations. It was what made them dangerous. "All units, form up around the Vanguard," Torres commanded, eyes scanning the incoming wave of Crackthul ships. "We need to buy ourselves time for reinforcements. We can't hold off the entire fleet alone." As the fleet shifted into formation, Torres' thoughts flickered back to the words of Envoy Rauker. The alien had warned them that hope alone would not be enough. He had spoken of humanity's peaceful nature as if it were a flaw, a weakness that the Crackthul would exploit. But Torres knew better. Humanity had survived the worst of what the universe had to offer, not through sheer firepower, but through perseverance and ingenuity. They didn't bend in the face of adversity. They adapted. And now was the time for that adaptation to be tested. "Incoming transmission from the Assembly," Harrow called out, her voice cutting through Torres' thoughts. "It's Rauker again." Torres felt a pang of frustration. She wasn't sure if she wanted to hear what he had to say, but she knew she couldn't ignore him. "Not now. Patch him through," she ordered, trying to mask the tension in her voice. The holographic form of Rauker flickered into view, his alien features cold and unreadable. "Captain Torres," Rauker said, his tone neutral, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "I trust you're aware that the Assembly is sending reinforcements to your location." Torres didn't miss the underlying criticism in his voice. The Assembly, in Rauker's eyes, was always the one to take charge. They weren't used to relying on others, certainly not a species they had once written off as insignificant. "We've been holding on our own for now," Torres replied, her voice steady. "But I'm not waiting for your reinforcements to get here. We'll handle this ourselves." Rauker's gaze narrowed. "I strongly advise you not to engage the Krakthul head-on," he said, as if giving a final warning. "They are not the kind of enemy you can defeat with sheer will alone. I will continue to monitor the situation and provide support where possible." Before Torres could respond, the transmission cut off abruptly. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. The Assembly's reluctance to fully commit to the fight wasn't just a matter of politics. It was a matter of pride. The Assembly believed that if they couldn't defeat the Krakthul, then no one could. But humanity wasn't going to wait for them to figure it out. They had already seen how long the Assembly took to act, how their bureaucracy slowed every decision to a crawl. "Captain," Harrow said, breaking through the silence, her voice filled with urgency. "The Krakthul flagship is recharging its main weapon. It's targeting our fleet." Torres swore under her breath. She had no time for hesitation. She had no time for politics. The Vanguard was the front line, and she was the one leading it. "Divert all power to forward shields. We need to hold this off long enough for the fleet to reposition." The Vanguard groaned under the strain, but the shields flared back to life. The giant Krakthul ship loomed ever closer, its dark shape eclipsing the stars behind it. The main weapon fired, a massive beam of pure energy that illuminated the space around them. It struck the Vanguard's shields, sending a violent shockwave through the ship. The hull trembled, but it held. "That was too close," Harrow said, exhaling in relief. "We're not done yet," Torres replied. "Keep those shields up. We need to take down their weapons, now." Another volley of plasma fire erupted from the Vanguard, this time more concentrated. The Krakthul flagship was reeling, its shields weakening. But just as it faltered, a new wave of Krakthul ships arrived, flooding into the battle. The odds were rapidly stacking against humanity's fleet. Torres gritted her teeth. "We may be outnumbered, but we're not done fighting. Everyone, hold your positions. We have one chance to make them realize that Earth doesn't back down." And with that, the battle continued, as humanity's defiance echoed across the stars. The Krakthul had underestimated them before. They would soon learn just how costly that mistake would be. The cold emptiness of space had never felt more suffocating. Captain Lena Torres stood at the command center of the Vanguard, her eyes glued to the tactical screen. The Krakthul had surrounded them, a swarm of ravenous ships closing in from all sides. Their weapons had found their mark repeatedly, but the human fleet held firm, not because of overwhelming firepower, but because of something far more dangerous: resolve. "Status report, Lieutenant?" Torres asked, her voice measured, though her heart raced with the realization of what they were up against. Harrow's voice crackled through the comms, strained but unwavering. "Shields are holding at 30%. Several ships have been damaged, but we're still functional. The Krakthul are relentless, Captain, but we're not out yet." Torres' jaw clenched. The odds were slipping away, and every heartbeat brought them closer to the edge. The fleet had held its ground longer than anyone had expected. But there was no denying the truth. They were fighting an enemy that had no regard for mercy, for terms, or for peace. The Krakthul were warriors born from a different galaxy, a species forged through centuries of brutal survival. They didn't fight to win, they fought to annihilate. She glanced at the holographic display of the battlefield, her fingers hovering over the controls. Earth's fleet was no match for the Krakthul in raw firepower. But they had something else. Humanity's greatest strength, something the aliens had missed in their cold calculations: unity. The human spirit could not be measured in numbers or in the size of their weapons. It was something deeper, more primal, and it was something the Krakthul had yet to understand. The message from the Assembly echoed in her mind. They would not send their reinforcements. Their confidence in the inevitability of humanity's failure had been absolute. "Your species is too peaceful to survive," Rauker had said. He believed the Krakthul would be the final proof that humanity was a passing anomaly in the galactic ledger. But Torres refused to believe that. She couldn't. Not after everything they had fought for, not after the sacrifices that had been made to get to this point. If she had learned one thing in her years of command, it was this: humanity's fight was never just about survival. It was about refusing to let the universe forget who they were. "Prepare to engage the flagship," she ordered, her voice resolute. "We take the fight to them. No more waiting." Harrow blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "Captain, you're not suggesting we—" "I am," Torres interrupted. "We can't keep playing defense. If we don't take out their flagship, this will be over before it even begins. We have one shot at this, Harrow. We're taking the fight to them, and we're going to make sure the Crackthul remember who they're dealing with." There was no hesitation in Harrow's voice now. "Understood, Captain," diverting all power to weapons and shields. The ship lurched as it veered from the safety of formation, surging toward the massive Crackthul flagship. A volley of plasma fire raked across the Vanguard's shields, but Torres barely flinched. Her mind was clear now, her focus honed in on the singular goal ahead: disable the flagship. If they could take out their command ship, they would throw the Crackthul into disarray. As they closed the distance, the Vanguard's guns roared to life. Each shot was a prayer, each blast a desperate plea for survival. The Crackthul flagship returned fire, its massive weapons tearing through space with a brutal, almost elegant precision. But Torres could see the cracks beginning to show in their defense. The flagship wasn't invincible. "Target their command tower," Torres ordered. "Focus fire, all weapons. We need a direct hit." The Vanguard surged forward, weapons blazing. Each shot tore through the void with devastating force, but the Crackthul flagship responded with fury, unleashing a salvo that rocked the Vanguard to its core. The ship shuddered violently, sending waves of pain through its hull. Harrow's voice came through the comms again, strained but unwavering. "Shields are down to 15%, Captain. We can't take much more of this." Torres gritted her teeth, but she didn't flinch. "Hold steady. We've come this far, and we're not backing down now." The Vanguard closed in, mere kilometers from the Crackthul flagship. Torres could see the glowing blue glow of its core, a pulsating energy source that powered their weapons. She didn't need to give the order. Her crew had already moved into position, each one focused on the task at hand. "All cannons, target the core," Torres shouted. The ship's massive guns fired in unison, each blast hitting its mark with surgical precision. The core of the Crackthul flagship flared, a burst of energy flashing outward as it absorbed the impact. For a moment, the space between the ships was filled with blinding light. When it cleared, Torres could see the damage they had caused: cracks running through the flagship's surface, a rupture in its weapons array. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was enough to cripple it. But the fight was far from over. A second wave of Crackthul ships, seemingly undeterred, raced forward to reinforce their dying flagship. "Incoming reinforcements," Harrow warned. "More Crackthul ships are entering the system." Torres' heart pounded in her chest. The odds were narrowing even further. But she wasn't about to let her crew die for nothing. She took a deep breath, staring into the firestorm unfolding before her. "All ships, focus on those reinforcements. We've hit their flagship, but we need to eliminate their support. No one else dies today." The Vanguard charged forward again, taking the lead. The fleet, battered but unbroken, followed close behind. As the ships clashed, Torres felt something stir within her. The Crackthul were relentless, but humanity was more than just a species. They were a force of nature, and they weren't going to be extinguished so easily. The tide of battle had shifted, but it was far from over. Every shot, every maneuver brought them closer to an uncertain future. But there was one thing that was clear: the Crackthul would not be the ones to decide humanity's fate. Not today. And so, with fire in their hearts and courage as their armor, Earth's fleet pressed forward into the heart of the storm.